Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise thee and do powerfully command thee, O Spirit. Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise thee and do powerfully command.
In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hello, welcome to the Abracast. I'm your host, Dr. John Towers. So, just like last summer, could be known as various things, I imagine, but specifically the Antifa stuff. Had Trevor Loudon on the show. We talked about where Antifa came from, and around that time, I busted out my the Little Blue Evil book, The Coming Insurrection, just to get some perspective on Antifa and what was sort of going on. We're going to start chipping away at a new evil book this evening. I'm not talking about the Satanic Bible, or I'm not talking about a Key of Solomon or anything like that. We're going to be starting work on Alexander Dugin's book called The Fourth Political Theory. The Fourth Political Theory, Moscow Eurasian Movement, from 2012. So this guy is the guy. He's like a thinker, and he sort of, it seems like he might be sort of like Putin's Thomas Paine or something. Like, he's spelling out sort of what's going on. The other important thing that I see idiots doing all over the place right now, it is picking a side with this. Like, we've got to go to war with Russia. We got to enforce a no-fly zone, and, you know, all of this stuff. And what we need to kind of understand is there are no good guys left. I'm speaking from the steel buckle of the Rust Belt here in the States, and we have no moral authority anymore. We have no moral compass. We have no ethics that make us the good guy. And I believe when I get to editorializing about this book, you're going to see where I think we are on the spectrum of the four political theories that we're going to be talking about. So they're all bad. Like, well, the first one's not bad. But if we're framing this as like what is going on, what's Russia's role in this, the death of Western civilization, you know, that we've really been hammering on lately, you know, because it's like fucking current events. Like, we can see it happening right outside our window. So enough. I'm going to let Dugin speak for himself here. This is the introduction, chapter 1, to be or not to be. In today's world, politics appear to be over, at least. as we used to know. Liberalism persistently fought against its political enemies, which had offered alternative systems, that is, conservatism, monarchism, traditionalism, fascism, socialism, and communism. And finally, by the end of the 20th century, had defeated them all. It would be logical to assume that politics would become liberal while all of its marginalized opponents surviving in the peripheral fringes of a global society would reconsider their strategies and formulate new united fronts, according to Alan D. Boynist, periphery against the center. But instead, at the beginning of the 21st century, everything followed a different script. Liberalism, I have to make it a point here. When he speaks of liberalism, he's talking about classical liberalism. The classical liberalism for, I don't know, for those of you who might not know, I was going to make an underhanded political comment, but classic liberalism is about the free market. It's about civil liberties. It's about the rule of law. Its emphasis is limited government, economic freedom, political freedom. Its theme is the individual. Individualism. Liberalism, which had always insisted on the minimalization of the political, made the decision to abolish politics completely after its triumph. Maybe this was to prevent the formation of political alternatives and to make its rule eternal. Or because of the political agenda had simply expired with the absence of ideological rivals, in the presence of which Carl Schmitt had considered indispensable for the proper construction of a political position. Regardless of the rationale, liberalism did everything possible to ensure the collapse of politics. At the same time, liberalism itself had changed, passing from the level of ideas, political programs, and declarations to the level of things pertaining to the very flesh of our social reality, which became liberal. This was presented not as a political process, but as a nature, an organic one. As consequence of such a turn of history, all other political ideologies, passionately feuding against each other in the last century, lost their currency. Conservatism, fascism, and communism, together with their secondary variations, lost the battle, and triumphant liberalism mutated into a lifestyle. Consumerism, individualism, and postmodern iteration of fragmented and sub-political beings. Politics became biopolitical, moving to the individual and sub-individual level. It turns out that it was not only the defeated political ideologies that left the stage, but politics as such, including liberalism, also exited. It is for this reason that the formation of an alternative became so difficult. Those who do not agree with liberalism find themselves in a difficult situation. The triumphant enemy has dissolved and disappeared. They are struggling against the air. How can one then engage in politics if there is no politics? I constantly have to remind myself that this is written from a Russian point of view. So that you might have to work to keep that in mind as well. There is only one way out: to reject the classical political theories. Both winners and losers strain the imagination, seize the reality of the new global world, correctly decipher the challenges of postmodernity, and create something new, something beyond the political battles of the 19th and 20th century. Such an approach is an invitation to the development of the fourth political theory, beyond communism, fascism, and liberalism. To move forward towards the development of the fourth political theory, it is necessary to reconsider the political history of the last centuries from new positions beyond the framework of cliches and the old ideologies. Realize and become aware of the profound structure of the global society emerging before our eyes. From Dugin's perspective, at this stage, I'm going to say a national feudalist perspective. He wants Russia to be Russia, China to be China. They want to destroy America, but America could be America, so on and so forth. They are about crushing the idea of globalism. I think I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but that's where we are right now. We are global fascists. Okay, like I said, I've officially become ahead of myself. So I'm going to reread this last portion now that I've said that. Reconsider the political history of the last centuries from new positions beyond the frameworks and cliches of old ideologies. Realize and become aware of the profound structure of the global society emerging before our eyes. Correctly decipher the paradigm of postmodernity. Learn to oppose not the political idea, program, or strategy, but the objective, the status quo, the most social aspect of apolitical, fractured post-society. So just because I'm like, hey, national global fascism sucks, they're the bad guy. But that does not make Putin and Alexander Dugin the good guy. So while we're going through this, another thing to think about, also along with this Antifa, when we were talking about Antifa last summer and we had busted out the evil blue book, the coming insurrection, we have to think, hey, just because a communist is punching a fascist doesn't make the communist a good guy. Remember, everybody, punch a Nazi. So that doesn't make the person punching a Nazi the bad or the good guy. It just makes them another bad guy. There's historically always been a struggle between nationalism or globalism and communists and socialists and fascism. The Nazis were national fascists. So we're different than the Nazis, but that doesn't mean that it's better. I got a late start here. My trusty vessel of the art with the mother's milk. So a good way to think about it is, remember the old Doctor Who episode? Well, I guess it's not the old Doctor Who. It's not like the Tom fucking Baker Doctor Who. That's my doctor, by the way. It's a David Tennant Doctor Who. And it's the Battle at Canary Wharf, where they spent a couple episodes hinting at Daleks and a couple of episodes hinting at Cybermen. And in the last two episodes, I guess, the finale, the Daleks and the Cybermen were fighting each other, and Doctor Who and, his guys were like caught in the middle. So this is a great example. Like the Daleks would be the Nazis, right? I'm sure I'm not the only person to be like, hey, the Daleks are like fucking Nazis. And then the Cybermen would be like communist, because everything must conform, delete. So just because the Daleks were fighting the Cybermen doesn't mean that the Daleks were good guys. Or when the Daleks were fighting the Cybermen, that doesn't mean that the Cybermen were the good guys. They're two shit stains fighting each other in fake robot suits. Finally constructed an autonomous political model in which offers a way and a project in the world of deadlocks, blind alleys, and endless recycling of the same old things. This book is dedicated to this very problem. as the beginning of the development of the fourth political theory. Through an overview and a re-examination of the first three political theories, and to the closely related ideologies of National Bolshevism and Eurasianism, came very close indeed to the fourth political theory. This is not dogma, not a complete system, nor a finished project. This is an invitation to political creativity, a statement of intuitions and conjectures, an analysis of new conditions in an attempt to at reconsideration of the past. The fourth political theory doesn't appear to us as the work of a single author, but as a trend of a wide spectrum of ideas, researches, analysis, prognosis, and projects. Anyone thinking in this vein can contribute some of his own ideas, notwithstanding more and more intellectuals, philosophers, historians, scientists, scholars, and thinkers will respond to this call. It is significant that the book Against Liberalism, this was another one of Dugin's books, I believe it was his first book, by the successful, Against Liberalism is not Dugin's book. Instead, it is a book by the successful French intellectual Alain de Benoist, which is also published in Russian by the publisher Amphimora, and the subtitle Towards the Fourth Political Theory. Undoubtedly, many things can be said on this theme by representatives of both the old left and the old right, and probably even by liberals themselves who are conceptualizing qualitative changes in their own political platform, where politics is disappearing from. For my own country, Russia, the fourth political theory, among other things, has an immense practical significance. The majority of Russian people suffer their integration into global society as a loss of their own identity. The Russian population had almost entirely rejected liberal ideology of the 1990s, but it is also apparent that a return to liberal political ideologies of the 20th century, such as communism or fascism, is unlikely, as these ideologies have already failed and historically proven themselves to be incapable of opposing liberalism, to say nothing of the moral cost of totalitarianism. Therefore, in order to fill the political and ideological vacuum, Russia needs a new political idea. For Russia, liberalism does not fit, but communism and fascism are equally unacceptable. Consequently, we need a fourth political theory. And if for some this is a question of freedom of choice, the realization of political will, which always can be directed both to an assertion and its negation for Russia. This is a matter of life and death, Hamlet's eternal question. If Russia chooses to be, then automatically signifies the creation of a fourth political theory. Otherwise, for Russia, there remains only the choice not to be. Then quietly to leave the historic and world stage and dissolve into the global world, neither created nor governed by us. So this is them, right? Being nationalist. Again, that doesn't make you a bad guy. But what is important is Dugin's point of view. He's saying, look, if we follow the world into this globalist bullshit mismatch, this is it. We are choosing not to be. And we're quietly to leave the historical world stage and dissolve into this global world, neither created nor governed by us. I would dare to add to that, maybe just as a way to add a little bit of context. You know, this global fascism nonsense isn't going to, I'm struggling, right? Because I'm still trying to get my arms around it. It isn't necessarily going to be led by anyone in particular. It's like the old the thing, like the globe with the octopus wrapped around it. There's like a committee of evil Bond villains that are making the decisions, and they're not politicians. They're like business people and bankers, and then they're pushing the information out to governments, and then they're using public-private partnerships as enforcement arms of their decisions, right? It's like the people, like Bloomberg and those guys, that they're taking pledges. Hey, we're not gonna make any decision that goes against being carbon neutral in 2050. We are not making any investments into anything that is going to go across that goal, right? Who are these people making these decisions? Who elected these people to make these decisions? Government's not needed anymore, bro. That shit is in the past. Concept inception, the end of the 20th century, and the end of modernity, chapter 2. The 20th century has ended, but it is only now that we are truly beginning to realize and to understand this fact. The 20th century was the century of ideology. Even the previous centuries, religion, dynasties, estates, classes, nation states played an enormous role in the lives of people and societies. Then, in the 20th century, politics had shifted to purely ideological realm, having redrawn the map of the world, ethnicities, and civilizations in a new way. On one hand, political ideologies represent early and deeply rooted civilizational tendencies. On the other, they were completely innovative. All political ideologies, having reached the peak of their distribution and influence in the 20th century, were the product of the new modern era, embodying the spirit of modernity, albeit in a different way, and even through different symbols. Today, we are rapidly leaving this era. Thus, everyone speaks more and more often of the crisis of ideology, or even of the end of ideology. In this fashion, the existence of the state ideology is explicitly denied in the Constitution of the Russian Federation. It is past time to address this issue more closely. The three main ideologies and their fates in the 20th century. The three main ideologies of the 20th century were liberalism, classic liberalism, not the clown shoe progressive liberals that we're constantly have to deal with. Liberalism, meaning classical liberalism, communism, meaning communism, and fascism, meaning fascism. They fought amongst themselves to the death, forming in essence the entire dramatic and bloody political history of the 20th century. It is logical, the number of these ideologies, these political theories, both based on their significance and in the order of their occurrence, as was done above. The political theory is liberalism. It arose first as early as the 18th century and turned out to be the most stable and successful ideology, having ultimately prevailed over its rivals in this historic battle. As a result of this victory, it proved, among other factors, the justification of its claim to the entire legacy of the Enlightenment. Today, it is obvious that it was liberalism that was the best fit for modernity. However, this legacy was disputed earlier, dramatically, actively, and at times convincingly by another political theory: communism. It is reasonable to all communists, much like socialism in all its varieties. The second political theory, it appeared later than liberalism as a critical response to the emergence of the bourgeoisie capitalist system. which was the ideological expression of liberalism, and finally, fascism, the third political theory as a contender for its own understanding of modernity's spirit. Many researchers, Hannah Arendt in particular, reasonably consider totalitarianism as one of the political forms of modernity. Fascism, however, turned towards the ideas of the traditional society in some cases. This gave rise to eclecticism in others, the desire of conservatives to lead a revolution instead of resisting it. And they're leading their society to the opposite direction. Arthur Moeller van den Broek, Dmitry Mezherovsky, etc. Fascism emerged later than the other major political theories and vanished before them. Their alliance to the first political theory with the second political theory, as well as Hitler's suicidal geopolitical miscalculations, knocked it down mid-flight. The third political theory was a victim of homicide, or perhaps suicide, by living long enough to see old age and natural decay. In contrast to the USSR, therefore, this bloody vampiric ghost tinged with an aura of global evil is attractive to the decadent taste of postmodernity, still frightening humanity to a great extent. With its disappearance, fascism cleared space for the battle between the first and second political theories. This battle took on the form of the Cold War, and it gave birth to the strategic geometry of a bipolar war which lasted for nearly half a century. By 1991, the first political theory, liberalism, had defeated the second political theory, socialism. This marked the global decline of communism. As a result, by the end of the 20th century, liberal theory is the only remaining one of these three political theories of modernity that is capable of mobilizing the vast masses through the entire world. Yet now that it is left on its own, everyone speaks in unison about the end of ideology. Why? The end of liberalism and the arrival of post-liberalism. It turns out that the triumph of liberalism, the first political theory, coincided with its end. It only seems to be a paradox. Liberalism had been an ideology from the start. It was not as dogmatic as Marxism, but was no less philosophical, graceful, and refined. It ideologically opposed Marxism and fascism, not only undertaking the technological war for survival, but also defending its right to monopolize its own image of the future. While the other competing ideas were alive, liberalism continued on and grew stronger precisely as an ideology, i.e. a set of ideas, views, projects that are typically for historical subject. Each of the three political theories had its own subject. The subject of communism was class. Fascism's subject was the state. The Italian fascism under Mussolini, or race in Hitler's National Socialism. In liberalism, this is clutch. In liberalism, classic liberalism, the subject was represented by the individual, freed from all forms of collective identity and any membership appartenance. While the ideological struggle had formal opponents, entire nations and societies, at least theoretical, were able to select their subject of choice, that of class, racism, or statism, or individualism. The victory of liberalism resolved this question. The liberal became the normative subject within the framework of all mankind. It is at this point that the phenomenon of globalization arises. The model of the post-industrial society makes itself known, and the postmodern era begins. From now on, the individual subject is no longer the result of choice. It is a kind of mandatory given. Man is freed from his membership and collective identities. The ideology of human rights becomes widely accepted, at least in theory, and practically compulsory. A humanity under liberalism comprised of individuals is naturally drawn towards universality and seeks to become global and unified. Thus, the projects of the world state, global governance, and the world government or globalism are born. A new level of technological development makes it possible to achieve independence from the class structuralization of industrial societies. The values of rationalism, scientism, and positivism are recognized as veiled forms of repressive totalitarian policies or the grand narrative, and are criticized at the same time. This is accompanied by a parallel glorification of complete freedom and independence of the individual from any kind of limiting factors, including reason, morality, identity, social, ethnic, and even gendered disciplines, etc. This is the condition of postmodernity. At this stage, liberalism ceases to be the first political theory and becomes the only post-political practice. Fukuyama's end of history arrives. Economics in the form of global capitalist markets replaces politics, and the states and nations are dissolved in the melting pot of world globalization. Having triumphed, liberalism disappears and turns into a different entity, into post-liberalism. It no longer has political dimensions. It does not represent free choice, but instead becomes a kind of historically deterministic destiny. This is the source of the thesis about the post-industrial society. Economics as destiny, thus beginning the 21st century, coincides with the end of ideology. That is, all three of them each meet a different end. This reminds me of the Batman movie with Bane. I mean, I don't want to say the good one. But when he's fighting, no need to stand on ceremony here, Mr. Wayne. You fight like a young man. Victory has defeated you. The third political theory was destroyed in its youth. The second died of decrepit old age, and the first was reborn as something else. Post-liberalism. The globalist market society, in any case, the form which all three political theories took on in the 20th century is no longer useful, effective, or relevant. They lack explanatory explain power, the ability to help us understand the current events, and the capability to respond to global challenges. The need for the fourth political theory stems from this assessment. The fourth political theory as resistance to the status quo. The fourth political theory will not be just handed to us without any effort. It may or may not emerge. The prerequisite for its appearance is dissent. That is, dissent against post-liberalism as a universal practice, against globalization, against post-modernity, against the end of history, against the status quo, against the inertial development of major civilizational processes at the dawn of the 21st century. The status quo and his inertia do not presuppose any political theories whatsoever. A global world can only be ruled by the laws of economics and the universal morality of human rights. All political decisions are replaced by technical ones. Machinery and technology substitute for all else. The French philosopher here, Alain de Benoit terms la governance, or micromanagement. Managers and technocrats take the place of politicians who make historical decisions, optimizing the logistics of management. Masses of people are equated to the single mass of an individual object. For this reason, post-liberal reality, or rather virtually displacing reality from itself straight into the complete abolition of politics. This abolition of politics idea that he's talking about, like the end of ideology, the end of politics, the end of the political age, I think we see that on the ground level by cancel culture, right? You just get omitted. It's like right out of 1984. You just get deleted, bro. They don't like what you say. Burp, bleep. You're not towing the line. You don't think that we've always been at war with Eurasia. You just get your book burnt. You know what I mean? Like, it's it. Because if you can't communicate, politics is a contest of ideas, right? If you can't express your idea, is it politics? You know, I think about that. Last time I heard, Putin still has a Twitter account. And he invaded a fucking place. He's killing people. Did you guys see the video of the tank just jumping the curve and smashing into this oncoming car? I don't know. I don't want to make this too much about what is really happening in Ukraine. More of just pointing out the worldview. This is, it's possible that this is Russia's response to this globalist bullshit that we're seeing. Then again, it might be part of it. Look at what's happening to the oil industry right now. At the time of this recording, actually 2 days before the time of this recording, oil hit like $120 a barrel. As Joe Biden was telling us how great the economy is, this happened at the State of the Union address. He's all up there like, the economy's great. Can I have my pudding now? Whatever. There's guys that do better Bidens than me. Here's to the death of Western civilization. Some may argue that liberals lie to us when they speak of the end of ideology. This is what my debate with philosopher Alexander Zinoviev. In reality, they remain believers in their ideology, and they simply deny all others the right to exist. This is not exactly true. When liberalism transforms from the beginning of an ideological arrangement to the only content of the extant social and technological existence, then it is no longer called an ideology, but an existential fact. An objective order of things, the challenge of which is not only difficult but also foolish. In the postmodern era, liberalism moves from the sphere of the subject to the sphere of the object. This will potentially lead to the complete replacement of reality by virtuality. The fourth political theory is conceived of an alternative to post-liberalism, but not as one ideological arrangement in relation to another. Instead, it is an incorporeal idea opposed to corporeal matter, as a possibility entering into a conflict with the actuality as that which is yet to come into being, attacking that which is already in existence. At the same time, the fourth political theory cannot be the continuation of either of the second political theory or the third. The end of fascism, much like the end of communism, was not an accidental misunderstanding, but the expression of a rather lucid historical logic. They challenged the spirit of modernity. Fascism did so almost openly, communism more covertly. See the review of the Soviet period as a special eschatological version of the traditional society by Mikhail Agruski or Sergei Kara-Murza, and Lost. This means that the struggle with postmodern metamorphosis of liberalism is the form of postmodernity and globalization should be qualitatively different. It must be based on new principles and propose new strategies. Nevertheless, the starting point of this ideology is precisely the rejection of the very essence of postmodernity. This starting point is possible, but neither guaranteed, nor fatal, nor predetermined, because it arises from man's free will, from his spirit, rather than from an impersonal historical process. However, this essence, much like the detection of the rationale behind modernity itself, imperceptibly earlier, which realized its essence so fully that it exhausted its eternal resources and switched to the mode of ironic recycling of its earlier stages, is something completely new, previously unknown and only surmised intuitively and fragmentarily during the earlier stages of ideological history and the ideological struggle. The fourth political theory is a crusade against. If the third political theory criticized capitalism from the right and the second from the left, then the new stage no longer features this political topography. It is impossible to determine where the right and the left are located in relation to post-liberalism. There are only two positions, compliance at the center and dissent at the periphery. Both positions are global. The fourth political theory is an amalgamation of a common project and a common impulse to everything that was discarded, toppled, humiliated during the course of constructing the society of the spectacle. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Mark 12:10. The philosopher Alexander Sketsky rightly pointed out the significance of marginalia. The formation of a new philosophical aeon suggests the term metaphysics of debris as a metaphor. The battle for post-modernity. The fourth political theory deals with the new reincarnation of an old enemy. It challenges liberalism, much like the second and third political theories of the past. But it does not. It does so under new conditions. The principal novelty of the new condition lies in the fact that all of the three great political ideologies, only liberalism secured the right to its own. The legacy behind the spirit of modernity was obtained, the right to create the end of history based on its premises. Theoretically, the end of history could have been different. A planetary Reich, if the Nazis had won, or global communism had the communists been right. However, the end of history has turned out to be precisely liberal. The philosopher Alexandre Kovachev was one of the first to predict this. His ideas were later reproduced by Francis Fukuyama, and since this is the case, then any appeals to modernity and its assumptions, to which the representatives of the second, to a greater extent the third political theories appeared in varying degrees, lose their relevance. They lose the battle for modernity as the liberals triumphed. For this reason, the issue of modernity, and now incidentally of modernization, may be removed from the agenda. Now the battle for post-modernity begins. And it is here that the new prospects open up for the fourth political theory. The kind of postmodernity which is currently being realized in practice, the post-liberal postmodernity, cancels out the strict logic of modernity itself. After the goal had been achieved, the steps towards reaching it lose their meaning. The pressure of the ideological shell becomes less rigid. The dictatorship of ideas is replaced by the dictatorship of things. Login passwords and barcodes. New holes are appearing in the fabric of the postmodern reality. As the third and second political theories have conceived of an eschatological version of traditionalism. That's what I should have said. Traditionalism. When I was trying to figure out feudal nationalism from Alexander Dugin's standpoint, they used the word traditionalism. Once tried to saddle modernity with the struggle with liberalism, the first political theory. Today, here is a chance of accomplishing something analogous. Falling apart. Hold on, I just need to catch up. All right, I'm going to try this whole thing. I'm going to try this thing again. As the third and second political theory is conceived as an eschatological version of traditionalism, once tried to saddle modernity with the struggle of liberalism, the first political theory today, there is a chance of accomplishing something analogous with postmodernity, using these new holes in particular. Liberalism developed flawlessly, operating weapons aimed at its straightforward alternatives, which was the basis for its victory. But it is the very victory that holds the greatest risk to liberalism. We must only ascertain the location of these new vulnerable spots in the global system and decipher its login passwords in order to hack that system. At the very least, we must try to do so. The events of 9/11 in New York demonstrated that this is possible, even technologically. The internet society can be useful, even to its staunch opponents. In any case, first and foremost, we must understand postmodernity and the new situation no less profoundly than Marx understood the structure of industrial capitalism. The fourth political theory must draw its dark inspiration from postmodernity from the liquidation of the Enlightenment program and the arrival of the society of the simulacra, intercepting this as an incentive for battle rather than a fatal given. All right. Well, this chapter goes on for a little bit, but I think this is a good place to stop for this evening, and we'll pick this up here in the near future and try to figure out what the fuck is going on over there in the Ukraine. They call this struggle from the Russian perspective the Great, what do they call it? Awakening. They call it the Great Awakening versus the Great Reset. Let's kind of put it in broad terms. So there it is. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope it shed some light on some stuff. I don't ask very often for you guys to support the show, but I've been spending a lot of time uploading archived episodes. So like the older episodes are getting archived and taken off the stream. So if you're looking for them, you can go to Subscribestar. You can find the links at Abracast.com. Drop me a couple bucks and enjoy those old episodes. Anyhow, I'll let Hilla tell you the rest. Have a good evening.
Thank
See you in a few
you
days.
for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. Please send an email or find us on social media and let us know what you think about the show. We would appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star rate and review wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can find Stigmata Studios, graphic, novels, and comic books. Take control of your destiny. Understand your past, put your present in context, and know your future with a twist. Check out the Abracast Tarot card deck. Your body is your temple, so let's make sure you got a badass t-shirt on it. Variety of cool occult themed t-shirts and other merch like stickers, wall art, mugs, and more. Welcome to the Red Archive. Get access to over 50 hours of archived episodes, more bonus audio, additional exclusive content. All this for only $1 a month. Are you interested in the occult, history, conspiracy, and violence? Learn more at Abracast.com.